Welcome to Subject to Power. I'm El Kamihira. For those of us who live in the Northern Hemisphere, we're nearing the winter equinox and the darkest days of the year. I grew up in northern Norway, well above the Arctic Circle, and this time of winter meant no sun at all for weeks. And for us, that meant life slowed down and quieted down, kind of hibernation. And a lot of northern peoples embrace this kind of hibernation even today in our hyper-productive, lit-up 24/7 world. You know, we get a little less social, a little more introverted, keep a little bit more to ourselves, waiting for the sun to return. My guest today, Kaarina Kailo, comes from that Arctic world also, living and working deep in the forests of Finland, some hours north of Rovaniemi, which happens to be the official hometown of Santa Claus. Kaarina is a researcher with past professorships at universities in Finland and Canada, and the author of a large body of articles, as well as several books, such as The Woman Who Married the Bear. Her research and writing spans across a big map of women's cultural studies and folklore, Northern women's culture, goddess mythologies, Indigenous worldview and theory, modern matriarchal studies and societies of peace, the gift economy, the bear religion, and what we're going to be talking about today, the cultural history and spiritual roots of sweat ceremonies and sauna rituals. Kaarina has spent many years investigating the very old history of sauna and sweating cultures in Finland, in Old Europe, and in Indigenous cultures in North America. And with her new book, Sauna Culture, Sweat and Spirituality, she explores the origins of pre-Christian, pre-patriarchal sauna as a sacred space for healing and rebirth, and how female symbols and the maternally perceived cosmos in past sweating cultures have been transformed. In this episode, we talk about feminist spirituality, the sauna as a healing space for the body, the spirit, and the mind, what it means to reclaim peace, equality, and sacredness for women, and how we embrace the darkness of winter so that we can be reborn in the spring. You have spent a lot of years researching the roots and history of sauna as a culture, as a place, and you wrote sauna culture, sweat, and spirituality as kind of a culmination. Is that fair to say? Like culmination of all of your years of research? And, you know, a lot of people think of sauna, I think, as a Scandinavian, maybe specifically Finnish concept that is all about like wellness. But the way your research situates it, it's in a much greater context. And so I'm interested in all of the aspects of your research into sauna culture, you know, where it comes from and what it means to those who used it and what it means today. And
okay, well, I lived in Canada for 17 years. And at one point, when neoliberalism started entering into universities, I suffered a burnout because I was short-staffed as a head of the Women's Studies program at Concordia University at Simone de Beauvoir Institute. And I started dreaming of the sauna because nothing seemed to help me in my exhaustion. And I started missing the Finnish sauna because I remembered that it was a place that I always left much happier and in better form than when I entered it. And so I started looking for saunas in Montreal. I went to hotels and started using saunas there. And then I did a study of Finnish-Canadian sauna culture, totally self-interested because I wanted to get to the sauna.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so I traveled to Sudbury and Thunder Bay and all kinds of places where there were lots of Finnish immigrants.
Oh,
And, of course, they invited me to have a sauna. And then, because I was truly interested in what was left of the spiritual rituals of the sauna and what the immigrants knew about it as opposed to the Finns in Europe.
oh, sure.
So that's how it started. And then it just went more deeply into the roots. And when I was interested in the bear mythology because of dreams, then I started seeing these connections. So they didn't start as a let me study sauna and bear mythology.
And that also led you into, I don't know if this was later or at the same time, but that you started making a connection between Finnish sauna culture and Indigenous sauna culture in North America.
Well, of course, it coincided because when I was in Canada, I got to know a lot of Cree people in my neighborhood. And with them, I went to the north, to James Bay area, and I got to visit sweat lodges. And so
Okay.
I became aware of their culture in Canada. And they asked me, well, how about your sauna? What is special about your sauna? And then I realized that I knew very little, if anything, about my own roots. And that's why I was triggered to start looking into it so that I would be able to give back to the native people what they were giving me. And
Right.
what I learned from the Crees that I was in close contact with was they always said, go seek out your own roots so you don't have to take shortcuts through our culture. So
Oh, interesting.
if you have longing for something exotic among us, find it in your own culture. And I took it literally. That's why I started researching my pre-Christian roots. And I found a lot of the same phenomena like the gifting philosophy, which is central to them. This idea that instead of charity, everybody gives in a circle. A gives to B gives to C, and everyone's taken care of without the reciprocity of I give you hoping to get back more from you than what I give to you. The gifting is also a big philosophy which has to do with relationships with nature and with other species. So you have to, for instance, in the sauna, we have this belief that you have to leave food and drink for the elf, the sauna elf. And you have to get out of the sauna at midnight because then it's the spirit's world turn to have a sauna. And we also take animals into the sauna. And my dog, she would always take a sauna with us. And the culture has changed an awful lot in that respect. But the native people have simply kept a lot of the things that we used to have. And by having familiarized myself with their ways, I was able to ask new questions about my own culture. So instead of copying it from them and bringing it to my culture, I located it my own culture, and it feels much more empowering. They remind me about us having had similar sustainable positive practices, and I find it in my own culture. Then I think that they have just been a good role model. And I would think that they would think also that that's good rather than bad because they want us to heal. They don't want us
Yeah.
to remain caught in a consumerist patriarchal culture.
You know, I think as Europeans, there's this identity of the colonizer wherever you go in the world. And I think women in particular may yearn to shed that identity of colonizer.
Exactly, that's what I'm doing. And I think that Norse mythology, that rich culture of Galdur and Freya and all of that, it's also very important and very rich. I was amazed when I started researching it. The research showed how much we have in common with the Sweat Lodge. And that's where I wanted to go even more deeply into it.
Sure. And what were the connections that you found, like both on the Finnish side and on the Native American side?
Well, the Native American side became much more important at one point because I realized that they had retained the most authentic, the most ancient aspects of the sauna as a spiritual space. They had still the symbolism intact. And for instance, giving thanks to the fire, to the water, having rituals that involved the earth, the fire, the water, the air. That was still totally original among the native people. And we crawled into the sweat lodge imitating the bear. So it was totally different from the now commercialized, objectified sauna, which has become very much a patriarchal institution for profit making. And it's not only that, obviously, but in comparison, it has changed radically from what it was in the beginning. And among the native people, it hasn't changed. So they have managed to retain their culture intact from the onslaught of Western ideas and the market economy.
And so, what were some of the features that sweat lodges had retained that you may have found from looking back into history that they preserved, or that had symbolic meaning?
There is this motto of so above as below. It's this idea of connection between macrocosm and microcosm. And native people still have it reflected in their architecture, the way they build the sweat lodge. Everything is symbolic. The directions are respected. The sauna has 3 layers, the upper world, the middle world, the underworld, and they are echoed in the sky world because the Great Bear is the spiritual sky screen where people got advice for when was the best time to hunt or to get pregnant or whatever. And that was reflected in the way that the sweat house or sweat lodge was even built as a round structure, because everything in nature is circular. The birds make their nests, they are circular. The spirals, the growth is not linear, it's circular. So the microcosm of the sauna reflects the universe. And then there's specific rules where different people sit. The entrance is on the east side from which the sun rises. Those kinds of elements you still find among the Finns as well. I mean, it's not systematically applied, but there are echoes of it, and people still seem to know that the directions are important. There's like a whole cosmology involved in how in the middle of the sweat lodge, in its early form, you had the fire and the pillar, which represented the world tree, and people would sort of be seated around the world tree, the tree where the bear skull was hung. So it's all connected in a very specific way. And the native people have really, it's amazing, the Pueblo kivas are underground, and you go underneath with a ladder, and it's like you are going to the underworld, to the grandmother realm, and that's where you respect the elders, and it's part of the ancestral worship. And they even bury the dead in some cultures in the walls or under the ground in the house, because they wanted to have the ancestors close by to get advice from them. And this is one element that has remained even in the Finnish culture. I mean, we don't bury the elderly people there. No, but for instance, you throw löyly, this steam, on the rocks. To create the löyly, you throw messages into the fire, and you honor the dead people in the sauna in the same way. But the mechanical system has now replaced all of this with automatic sprinklers that pour water on the rocks. So you don't have to ritually pour the water anymore, because it's done automatically in some saunas. And that means that you're totally removed from the ritual of remembering those who have passed to the other side. So the mechanic worldview is destroying every ritual. And even the rocks used to be sacred. We believed that the rocks have spirits. And the rocks would be gathered together by members of a family. So it would be like creating an altar in the sauna. Now people buy them from the market. They are all uniform rocks that you just pour quickly on top of the stove. And there's no relationship anymore with what is sacred in the culture. So, I'm interested in recovering all of those symbols and practices.
Yeah, it's so interesting what you write about. You call it feminist spirituality, trying to recover this spirituality in the sauna space from the kind of patriarchal takeover. And, it's striking when you talk about it in that way, that the sort of what used to be spiritual actions that you took in the sauna, like with the steam, that it's been mechanized and that the spiritual aspect of it has kind of been destroyed. So can you talk a little bit about what the patriarchal takeover kind of means in a sauna context?
Well, I make some speculations, like when I was studying the Paleolithic cave drawings and the cave culture, the bear altars and the bear religion, I realized that they were worshipping or serving the Great Mother because they were serving the earth in its sort of personalized form together with the bear. The common link between these two beings is, of course, rebirth and the fact that there is mysteriously life arriving from the middle of the winter and death, the hibernation, where the bear doesn't even get food. Suddenly in the spring, she emerges with cubs out of death. And so that became the symbolism of the sauna as a mysterious place, so sacred that you can actually be reborn. And of course, in the old days, it was believed that women could provide rebirth into the clan after death. So death was not the absolute end of everything, but it was a transition to a new state, a new opportunity to return to the clan. And that's why you would give the names of dead relatives to the child so that they could come back. So the patriarchal system was very different because in the early spiritual system, which was very ecological and sustainable.
Circular.
Yeah, it was circular totally, and everything is connected in the circle, macrocosm, and there's no hierarchy because it was understood that we need everything and everyone, and the non-human life is necessary to keep humans alive. So there was this gifting economy and culture of giving back to nature for its gifts. And the bear was considered half animal and half human. So you didn't have any of the patriarchal dualisms and binaries. And
or hierarchies. Yeah.
exactly. And so in patriarchy, it all changed because only white elite heterosexual men were appreciated, and they built everything around their interests, objectifying and othering Native peoples, women, minorities, and so on. So it's a radically different system. And also it's based on blind faith regarding authorities. Whereas in shamanism, you didn't have any middlemen. You could access your own inner spirit world directly without the middlemen. And so there was none of that manipulation where with patriarchal religions, you have to blindly make a leap of trust to believe what the men are saying about right and wrong. Whereas in the spiritual system of the pagans or the first religions, you could see you didn't need to believe anything because the Mother Earth was right in front of you. And the spiritual systems were based on what everyone could verify and see for themselves. And there was no, none of this manipulation.
Yeah, what strikes me is that it's a very embodied belief system rather than a disembodied belief system where you believe this abstract sky god as opposed to an embodied experiential spirituality.
Exactly. And that's where the sauna comes in, because as an alternative to the patriarchal church, where relations are distant and detached, and in the other world, in the sauna, you can feel the Holy Spirit descending on your body. Your body is activated in all the senses. And when you sit there and meditate or have a ritual, your whole body is affected. Whereas if you sit in the pews in the church, you are only in your mind space, if you understand what I'm saying. It's not embodied.
Absolutely.
And the shamans would do incantations and all kinds of things. Instead of the male priest or pastor, the elderly women were the ceremonial centers. They were the ones who transmitted the culture, the beliefs of the culture, who did initiation rituals and welcomed the women who gave birth in the sauna. So they were the equivalent of the priests in the patriarchal church, but in a different spirit, because everyone was included, even though women were central.
What you write about there is so interesting. I'd love to get into that a little bit, about the devaluation of women and the devaluation of our, life-giving capacity, to sort of making this sharp division between the profane and the sacred, and that the sacred was kind of in the masculine realm and the profane somehow otherizing women. Well, you talk about it much better, so I'll let you explain.
Well, I think that this abstract philosophical idea of the impure and the pure is still reflected today in politics, when you think that all the work that women do, all the bodily work of caring and nurturing and the domestic world, it's downplayed. It's not given the same value as technology and the male-oriented fields. Everything that is the routine of the everyday world, without which we would not survive, it's considered impure, even though that word is not used anymore. But it's reflected in the low pay of women, or the horrible treatment of pregnant women today in the US, or lack of daycare centers, or lack of affordable care. And, a woman who can't go to work when she's looking after the child, she's likely to be poor. The double standards and the lies on which patriarchy is built is just coming, I think, at this moment in history. People are seeing through it finally in a big way. And that's why women are refusing to now get married or to give birth, because they don't want to be poor. I mean, they can't see that treating women and life as impure, of course, results in not women giving birth enough. Animals in captivity apparently have trouble getting pregnant because they don't feel safe. So women are the same.
Yes, absolutely. And I think they're so desperate to keep women in a position of servitude, and, working so hard to make women feel as if you have to conform to this or else, and remain in a position of oppression. And women are just closing their legs.
Exactly. And there's a collective movement now. I mean, it started in South Korea and now it's spread to the States. And everywhere women are complaining about not wanting to bring children to this world because it's so polarized between the rich and the poor. And for me, sauna is the movement we could start actually, some people have started it in Canada and elsewhere, because it's the alternative to the patriarchal church. It's the space of peace, of equality, of ritual, and the sacredness that women have lost or are craving for because they don't want to go to the patriarchal church anymore. So I think that there's a lot of potential in recovering the sauna. And in Germany, some women are very interested in reviving it. And I've been contacted by Canadians who feel the same way. And of course, the native people don't have to revive it because it is their church. It is their sacred space. So it's a multidimensional healing space where you deal with the body, with the spirit, with the mind, the psychology, everything. Mental health problems are huge in the world right now because life is so tough. So even though
Yes.
the sauna doesn't solve the economic problems, it could be a space for healing you sufficiently that you can start building a different kind of generation. And you can have a shift of values. And of course, the sauna has been a political space as well. The Finnish parliament, before there were so many women, they used to meet in the sauna and make decisions in the sauna. So it has been a place of decision making because there is this idea that you are more honest and you're more open and authentic when you are naked. So
Yeah.
people sitting together naked are not as prone to lying and manipulation somehow.
That makes so much sense to me. I grew up saunaing myself with my family and friends and so on. Maybe not same as you in Finland, but I really recognize when you're talking about like being bare, naked in the sauna,
Hmm.
just like feeling there's a mix of vulnerability and we're all the same. You can't have a mask on, the sort of egalitarianness of that.
Well, the sauna is not only a space for washing yourself and resting and having the hype that comes from the alternation of hot and cold. It's been a philosophical inspiration for Finns, and I'm amazed by how many sayings we have in culture. For instance, one dictum that says, "Have your sauna when it's hot." And it's very profound. It's like seize the day.
Yeah, yeah.
you know, a lot of interesting sayings about like if sauna, the tar, and spinsters don't cure you, then nothing will. I think the idea is that a spinster is so passionate about unfulfilled sexual desire that if having sex with a spinster doesn't cure you, then nothing will. It's
Oh.
I think that's the idea in it. But tar is a holy product for us. It's the smell of tar from the rowing boats that we grew up with, and houses were painted with tar, and it's a childhood memory, the smell, and memories come through those odors. So sauna and tar were very sacred in that way. And I think that it has to do with accessing memories of childhood and accessing your roots, the continuum of your family and your relations. So there's a lot of wisdom, and even Finns today, they write a lot of sauna books, but they're mostly about architecture and the new design and new products. But the philosophical side of it has been left aside. And when I wrote this book and I sent it to some sauna societies, and they consist mainly of men, it's
Yeah.
become a very patriarchal system and very
Mm.
exclusionary and elitist. And one of them did a review of my book for the International Sauna Association. And the last sentence was, "This is a very interesting book if you can stomach it."
Oh, that's so mean.
I know. So in a way, it could be good advertising because it leaves you wondering what is there that you can't stomach. But it's
Mm.
obviously the feminist, ecofeminist, maternal aspect that I'm bringing up that has been bypassed.
I mean, the connections that you make to sort of the female origins of the sauna, the way you describe it, a time when sexuality and women's creative sexual power were revered. And you theorize that saunas may have originated with women's menstrual huts.
That's right. It's Judy Grant who first alerted me to this kind of research about menstrual huts being the prioritized sacred space for women to gather their blood wisdom and to learn. When you think of Little Red Riding Hood, she's going through the woods to visit the grandmother. And that's the same hut as in Baba Yaga, the Russian folk tales. It's the magic hut where the young girl is meeting the mother and the grandmother and learning the rituals of womanhood. It's an initiation. And then the wolf comes and interferes, and, there's all this rape. And so it's the patriarchy comes and interrupts and interferes with the women's sacred rituals. And I feel we should rewrite all the fairy tales as well, because, they've been distorted. And Baba Yaga is when you think about it, she's the major evil figure who puts Hansel and Gretel into the oven. But It was amazing when I realized that putting young people into the oven was putting them into the sauna and having them feel a symbolic dismemberment as part of the initiation rite of moving from childhood to adulthood. So it's a puberty rite, and she doesn't kill them. She doesn't eat them. But
That's
it's like
so interesting.
demonizing the authority of elderly women who were the masters of ceremony.
Yes.
And so it's amazing how patriarchy has been rewritten totally to confirm the patriarchal standards and view. And now Trump is trying to do the same thing, denying that you shouldn't use the word woman anymore, suppressing women's history, destroying the East Wing of the White House, which is the women's wing. So it's all happening.
Is it really?
Yeah. It's where the memories are of the important female figures in politics. So the same destruction and erasure of the feminine and of women and women's contribution to culture is in its most extreme form now in the States. You're not allowed to talk about women's rights anymore. And you have to suppress the history and rewrite it so that only the white males are in the center. And that's been going on ever since patriarchy, and patriarchy is very young. It's only about 5,000 years.
Yes, I would love for you to talk about how you dig through the layers of patriarchy to discover the pre-patriarchal history.
Well, it's been a long process and big job, because I've been doing it for 30 years and more. And, it's women like Max Dashu and Genevieve Vaughan, Heidi Gutner-Abendroth, Vicky Noble, Mary Condren. There's so many women who have done their share of going back in time and getting rid of the patriarchal layer, to find what's before it. And of course, Maria Kimbutas and archaeomythology is the most important source of information about the matristic societies and old Europe, which was able to be peaceful because of the goddess culture and women being in the center and being given to sustainability rather than power over. And now I'm taking the same information from Scandinavia. And there's not that many of us, but there is a few who have been finding, first of all, the major figures like Hel and Freya, and I've written about the Golden Woman and Louhi in the Finnish Kalevala, but they're all the same because they are the great mothers of life and death. It's very fascinating, and there's like a lot of new information about the Ice Age and how in the Ice Age already there were the Fosna and Komsa people here who might have lived in the caves and who might have worshipped this figure Hel, because the geographical place names are a clue to what has been important. There's a lot of place names in the north with Louhi, and there are a lot of place names with Hel. I mean, Helsinki, Helsingør, Helgoland. And what I was really amazed about is that some people think that Holland, Hellas, Helvetia, all those places in mythology would go back to Hel. So it would
Can you talk about Hel a little bit? Who is she?
Oh, Hel is the great mother goddess of Scandinavia, of the north. And there's speculation about her being a powerful figure because of the numerous place names that refer to her. And then she's being referred to in Norse legends. And of course, they are already patriarchal from the 14th century. But when you find figures that are demonized and blamed for everything, then you already know, aha, they had to demonize this figure because she was so powerful. And that's the same strategy everywhere in mythology. So when you find negative descriptions, you know already that we're dealing with something important from the past. And
So true.
yeah, but I'm still in the middle of digging more information about hell. It's very exciting. And then thanks to Maria Gimbutas, of course, I can look for other things. For instance, there's at least one figurine that looks very much like the ones that Gimbutas unearthed from old Europe. There's one in Finland that looks like a shaman, like an old figure, and it's from the Stone Age. Those have not been really well analyzed, and they have not been linked with archaeomythology because the men don't read that. So they're not actually competent to study the past because they ignore what women have written. This bias against women scholars makes them blind. And I don't think they are rigorous scholars, because if you ignore some factual knowledge only because it's by women or because it threatens patriarchy, that's not scholarship, that's propaganda.
Well said. I think that patriarchal lens of history, these patriarchal historians think of our past as made by men, right? So they're only going to look at male accomplishments or male history.
Yeah, I think partly it's conscious by those who have the sort of Trumpian agenda, and partly it's ignorance by the well-meaning men. I'm not saying that all men are poor scholars and intentionally distort facts, but they are not brought up and they are not encouraged to respect the kind of research that women have been doing. And so there's accumulated bias. And you can see it also in the sauna. The fact that most books are about architecture and building, how to build a sauna, it shows that it's like male enclaves that are valorized, that they get the money. And the fact that I got such a questionable review by this one man, it was because it's about feminist spirituality and not about building and the latest design and what products can be sold now in the market. And even the sauna conferences are very elitist. They cost a lot of money to go. They're not open to the public. And most of the speakers are men who are selling products related to the sauna.
Yeah.
So it's quite clear that the sauna culture has been appropriated by men, and not just men, but elite men. And it's serving the market now rather than its original purpose, which was the wellness for everybody.
Yeah, and such an important sort of spiritual space. Yeah. You have mentioned several times now the bear religion, or the connection between sauna and the bear figure. I would love for you to explain a little bit what this is and its connection with the sauna for people who have no idea, about this history and these roots.
The first saunas that have been documented in the more recent history, I'm not talking about only the Paleolithic or Neolithic, they were earth saunas. They were kind of cave saunas. They were built halfway into the ground or fully into the ground. In Ireland, for instance, the sweat houses are mostly holes in the ground that look is exactly like bears' dens. And you would crawl inside, and in a way you would symbolically hibernate. In other words, you would meditate and you get rid of toxins and you fast, you don't eat because your body feels better when you don't eat there. And it's a healing space, meditation space. It's a space where you get in touch with the ancestors and the spirit world. And in Ireland, they were built in places where there were a lot of mushrooms. So they think that magic mushrooms were part of it. And they were places also for altered states of consciousness. And so kind of shamanistic healing and shamanistic spirituality. You know, the bear is considered the first shaman of the animal world. Apparently, humans learned about plants and herbs by following the example of bears. So what bears were collecting in nature, humans would copy. Really, they are very intelligent and they know so much about healing herbs in the woods. So women are considered to be the first shamans after the bears because they imitated the bears. This is what I talk about in The Woman Who Married the Bear, this book that we wrote with Barbara Alice Mann, that was actually awarded the best book of the year by the American Association for the Study of Women and Mythology. And I think it's because we clarified this oldest story of the woman who married the bear. Barbara in particular was talking about the old times when humans and bears lived together before a big catastrophe happened that forced humans to begin to hunt the bear and other animals, whereas according to their legends, they were companions prior to that. So there's a lot of new information also from the North American prehistory, and then my part was the Eurasian prehistory, and why this story is so important and why it's so widely spread. It's everywhere in the world almost, from Middle East to Armenia to Asia to North America to Finland to Sweden to Norway. It's such an old story. I have a hunch that it must be linked with the bear religion because it's women living with bears and having close contact and creating offspring. So it has become the totemistic origin story of the Scott Sami, for instance. They claim that they derive from the marriage of the woman and the bear, and that's why they are a powerful people. So it's a completely different origin story from, let's say, Freud, who talks about how the brothers get together and kill the father in order to get access to the mother. I mean, that's a whole other story of origins in Western society that is so different from the woman who married the bear. And this story is all about the land ethic and how to live in balance with other species and with nature. And it's about original instructions that the bear gives to the woman. And the woman is supposed to give these instructions to her culture about how to treat animals. And it's all about balance and sustainability.
As opposed to dominating and exploiting.
Exactly. So I think it's a very important alternative to the biblical stories of how to behave. I mean, the Bible probably has a lot of good things too. I'm not saying that, but what has been taken out of the Bible and made into the sort of original truth is very different in impact. I think the hibernation and the biocosmic sense of time is what unites women and bears. You know, women with their menstrual cycle allowed to calculate time, and the birth of the bear's cubs in the spring was another time calculator. It's a very rich story, and I wish they taught us all of these things in the school. And the fact that we had a lot of bear goddesses also in the past, all of this information has been suppressed.
That's right. And all major monotheistic religions have male gods. So we don't really have any female figures in our religions. And I think Carol, Kristen, a lot of other people talk about the importance of having these female symbols and the fact that we don't have them, that women are not present in our religions for the most part, either suppressed or made into minor figures. And we don't have those models that we yearn for, maybe.
Yeah, when you think about in our culture, it's all about fathers and sons and not about mothers and daughters. I don't want to replace patriarchy by only having sort of matriarchal symbols, but we need both stories for fathers and sons and stories for mothers and daughters. We need stories also about our relationship with the non-human species, because we depend on them and they have their own intrinsic value. When you think of how important dogs are for people, how much they help us and how they are mental therapy and they are emotional therapy and they are extremely important. And by the way, in Norway, you have also the bear story. It's Berit. Berit is the bear woman who marries a bear and leaves patriarchy and goes to live in the woods.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Do you still have bears in Finland? Like, are they roaming in the forests? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They are not far from where I am, but they avoid humans if they can. And they have every reason to do so because there's hunting season, which I don't accept. So you can hunt them. And I think that is gross. I mean, why would you need to kill bears? There's no reason. We don't need them for food.
You don't eat the meat, right?
Exactly. It's just the male desire to kill.
Yeah.
They claim that it's done in order to make sure we don't have too many bears, but I don't buy that.
In Norway, there are only literally just a handful of bears left. It used to be the country was filled with bears and wolves, and they now have very tiny population of both of those.
Did you know that Romania is the number one country with bears? They have more bears than any other place in the world.
Really?
Yeah, they are on the highways and they befriend people and, the Romanians feel very close to them. So there's lots of them in the woods there. Somehow they have managed to retain them. But we got away from the sauna quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I know, which is fine. I wanted to bring us back, though. You went looking for prehistoric or historic saunas elsewhere in Europe. Where did you go and what did you find?
Well, of course, the Russians have the banya. And there's also a very rich pre-Christian culture in Russia among the Slavic peoples and among the Finno-Ugric peoples who are now minorities in Russia. But the Baltic countries have retained also much of the old worldview, the old traditions. So, for instance, the Lithuanians and Latvians still have Laima, the goddess of the sauna, who is who is evoked when women give birth in the sauna. And when women have given birth, they call them bears. They say, "Here comes the bear." So a woman who has given birth becomes a bear. And I think it has to do with the bear religions and the fact that, the mystery has happened that you have brought new life in the womb, in the mysterious bear's den. And I am planning to go with Andrea Lötscher, who is a German filmmaker who wants to record more about women and the sauna in those countries. That's the next project that we have, to learn more about the sauna traditions. And I think that has to do a lot with what kinds of herbs and concoctions were used. We've lost a lot of information about what different trees can give us, like what is the difference between a birch whisk for massaging yourself as opposed to oak branches. Yeah. And all of that has a lot of medicinal properties. And there's a lot of information about that in Finland, but I think that in Lithuania they have even more because they were free of the Christian of colonization longer. They have kept themselves more isolated from Western influences and have managed to retain more of the sauna culture, maybe even more than the Finns. The Finns have kept it in a different way. We have developed it into the modern world, and we have superb modern products, but we have lost the spiritual side of it more than the Baltic people have. And I think that if we went to the pre-Christian period, we would find, again, the maternal aspect, because a new area of research is women's handicrafts and how from very distant times, from the Neolithic, the symbolism has retained the same. And so you can find in women's handicrafts in Norway, in Sweden, in Finland, in Alta, in Greece, the very similar images and symbols. And that shows you that through the handicrafts, women have retained even a shamanistic tradition.
And you also, in your book, you talk about the Iberian Galician saunas I found interesting.
Well, those are from the Iron Age. And it's interesting that the Iron Age sauna still has the Sheila Nagig type figure above the entrance, so that you are entering into a space from underneath the woman's legs. And it's a narrow channel that you go in. So it's like going back through the channel into the womb. The maternal imagery is obvious.
Can you explain what Sheila Nagigs are for those who don't know that figure?
This is a Irish kind of a crowed figure that represents life and death, two sides of the mother. So in some of the images, you have a beautiful image and then a skeletal aspect combined to represent life and death. And these figures would be carved above the entrance to the sweat house or a holy well. And now they are found on church walls. So I think that if they are now on church walls, they must have been in the early shrines or sweat lodges or sweat houses, because why would patriarchal religions adopt them otherwise? They must have been important.
And it's interesting because in like Christian terms or modern terms, they are quite explicit. It's like a female figure that's like spreading her legs and her vagina, right? Isn't that what they sort of look like? So I can see how the patriarchs came and said, that's dirty.
Impure, again, impure.
Vulgar. Yeah.
It brings to mind sexuality, and sexuality, of course, is negative. But I think
female sexuality in particular.
That's what I meant, yeah. And I think that they don't understand that it's about not only about life being sacred and, whole notion of rebirth being the key point, and the fact that in sauna women would give birth. So there's that.
Yeah.
But also in the pre-Christian cultures, sexuality was almost a sacrament. And sexuality was, a pleasure that was positive and not demonized as it is in patriarchy, especially when it's women who enjoy sexuality. It's a conscious effort to demonize women's sexuality and to label it as something sinful. And that's why the Sheila Nagig figure was given a bad reputation and was demonized.
Right.
It's really a mother-like figure representing life and death that's calling for you to enter the womb and to experience rebirth. That's amazing, that they could turn it into the opposite. In Finland, it's interesting, this idea of the vulva having powers of life and being associated with positive sexuality. We still have many stories and many folklore poems that explain that a woman would protect her cattle, her husband, her children by stepping over them with displayed legs. So the vulva was believed to have, there's a term, vaki, which reminds me of ki and chi and all the other terms for energy. Important energy force in that sexual vulva. And this life force was seen in the opposite way as a source of wellness and a source of protection. That same phenomenon has been turned to the opposite with the word cunt.
Yeah.
So that's the worst swear word, which used to be the sacred.
Which makes sense, right? Because in patriarchy, everything is upside down and inside out.
And again, because it's demonized, it must have been sacred before.
Right, exactly. The fact that it's been named impure is kind of the kind of the signal that this was once sacred. You write very beautifully in your book about kind of sacred darkness, or that, we're so obsessed with shedding light on everything and having everything kind of in the light, I feel. And we have lost connection with that creation, and creativity happens in the dark, in the womb, and the sacred darkness. And I'm going to quote what you say here: sacred darkness, quiet the mind, the manifest feminine energy in the darkness. We are ignited by the elements of nature that fuel our very existence. These structures provided restricted spaces that were cut off from everyday world. The sweat lodge ceremony also stressed darkness. No light must enter the lodge so that people may focus on their inner life, their beliefs, needs, feelings, issues, and spiritual connections. That really struck me, because I think in some senses we're so overstimulated, and we're getting more information thrown at us than we can handle. And the idea of sitting in a dark, warm space filled with good smells, like, it's such a healing thought.
Yeah, I was able to get rid of my burnout by going back to the sauna. And now I keep it as a routine to take a sauna at least once a week to get rid of the mental and emotional toxins. And I think people would feel much better if they did that. And plus, the new research says that the sauna, if you take it often enough, it can prevent dementia. So that's very important information. And it can also prevent coronary disease if you do it right. I mean, if you have heart problems and you just go and take really, really hot saunas and then jump into the lake, that can be problematic. But if you do it with common sense and moderation, apparently it's very good for your heart. But it has a lot of health benefits that have come out, and people just don't know about it. It can help prevent a lot of diseases.
And I also think we underestimate how much we need darkness, and that we need
That's true.
the mystery
Absolutely.
of darkness.
I actually like the dark period. I'm in here in the north, 2 hours from Rovaniemi. I'm at the Arctic Circle, and I feel like I'm hibernating now. It's comfortable. When you don't have to work really hard, of course. If you have to go to work early in the morning, it's tough, but I'm retired, so I can enjoy the darkness. And when the sun begins to come back, sometimes I feel almost like it's intrusive. It's like you're already comfortable in your sacred space, and then you slowly get back into the light.
It was great to talk to you, and thank you so much for staying on with me and talking about all of your research. It's been great.
Well, thank you for doing this and spreading the joyful message of feminist spirituality.
Thank you for listening to Subject to Power. You can find the show online at subjecttopower.com or subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts. I'd love to know your thoughts on these conversations, so please drop a note on the website or find us on social media. The best way to support the show is to rate and review Subject to Power on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other listeners find us. Subject to Power is written, hosted, and produced by me, El Kamihira. Audio engineering is done by Jason Sheasley at Abridged Audio. Cover art by B. Johnson, and music by Beware of Darkness.